Hi,
Okay. Hi.
this is Mindy. Mindy has been my friend for as long as I can remember having friends. Um, Fourth grade, right? I'm okay. So I guess I had some like little friends like before fourth grade, um, but like aware of being friends. And Mindy's done all kinds of amazing things with her life, and now she's a social worker therapist. Um, So before I totally fuck up the introduction, Mindy, could you just give the brief background of your journey?
Yeah. Um, you didn't fuck up. So I'm Mindy Brodsky. Um, I guess we'll start my journey when I was 8 years old and became one of Danny's first best friends. Um, but I was an attorney. I went to law school down in Miami and ended up moving to DC. I wanted to be a part of some hope and change in 2008. Super exciting time. I spent the next like almost 12 years doing social justice, civil rights work, global human rights work. Um, I loved it so much and also encountered some major personal difficulties, traumatic chronic health issues that were really difficult for me. And also awesome professional growth and getting to know different populations and working abroad. And personal and professional came together. I started meeting clinical social workers through my advocacy work, learning about the importance of trauma informed care for everyone. Um, and the more I learned about it, the more I decided that I wanted to learn more. And finally went into my boss's office and just said, it's your fault. I have to resign and go back to school. I never thought I would go back to school again. Um, but I did, and I got my master's in social work. And now I am working in clinical oncology social work mostly. I work with other populations as well. And I'm living in Raleigh, North Carolina since January. How's that?
Amazing. Um, it's interesting. I feel like we keep in our lives, we always have these moments of intersecting where we have things in common, and then we won't talk for a while, not for any bad reason, just we have lives, and then come together again for another intersection. It's funny how our journeys kind of parallel each other
Yeah.
in some ways. And um, I was in journalism, and my sort of advocacy wasn't. It was more, the broad scale kind of studying society, and I had an interest in social issues. It was a very different approach, but there's a little bit of a parallel there. And then both of us are going into this sort of mental health, personal development type of thing at this stage in our careers. So how the heck how the heck did that keep happening?
I don't know. It's a really nice gift though to like want to reach out. Like I think we probably talk once a year somehow, no matter what, even if we're not in touch. And then when I would see your newsletters recently, I would just be like, holy shit, Danny Gitas and I are speaking the same language and we need to talk more. And we need to work together when we can and put our heads together because yeah, I think there's such a mental health crisis in so many different ways in our country, around the world. Uh, and people are dealing with so much grief and anxiety and stress and, you know, wanting to live their best lives. I want to live my best life. And like, I think, you and I have found different ways to be excited about thinking about it and talking to other people about thinking about it and moving forward. It's super cool. And yes, like crazy, but I guess it kind of makes sense. We've always had a lot in common, I think. So it's nice.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So I'm curious about the transition more. I know you said you went into your boss's office and they're like, thanks a lot, it's your fault, I go back to school, great, um, I had a similar situation. I mean, I was self-employed, but at some point I kind of went into my own office and said, you're going back to school, you're going to do this other thing. Um, so I'm curious about your transition and what led you to want to make the change. I know you talked about some health issues and trauma, and you obviously share whatever you're comfortable or not. But could you describe that process?
Yeah. I'm really comfortable sharing. I'll answer any questions about it. But I basically have been dealing with these terrible physical, chronic health, chronic pain issues for years. I had multiple surgeries. I had done every kind of physical therapy. I'd been through a lot, seen many doctors, traveled to see them. And I had gone, and it just kept getting worse and terrible and debilitating to the point where, like, I would be a lobbyist and working in Congress, and I'd be on Capitol Hill, and I'd be like holding the wall to move. And I was in my mid-20s, and I was a mess. And I didn't know why. So I had a lot of diagnoses. It just wasn't clear. And at some point, and it's a long story, but I'm going to shorten it. I found a book that somebody had given me, and I revisited it 5 years later after the first time it landed on my bookshelf. And it was about mind-body connection. And it was about thinking about how traumatic experiences, how even small traumatic experiences can just leave little marks on you along the way. And those little marks can add up. And your brain can do these awesome things to distract you from dealing with pain, emotional pain. So physical pain can make itself very apparent, and that becomes an awesome distraction from dealing with like the shitstorm of traumatic experience or any kind of adverse experience. Once I realized that that was what was going on, I found a trauma psychologist and I worked with that person, and I started getting better almost immediately. And it was magic, like magic. People told me I would live my full life in pain. Months later, I started running again. And I just started being able to change my life in radical ways. Career-wise, I was director of government affairs for a national organization, and I was at a conference that we were running, and I was doing a session on advocacy. My friend was leading a session on trauma-informed care with trauma survivors. And I went to go watch her session just to like be supportive, sit in the crowd. And I took notes the whole time. I listened to the whole program, and I walked out of there and was like, I got to do this.
Yeah.
I felt like I had to do it. It was like, I don't want to just read about this when I have free time or go to seminars once in a while. Like, I want to do this, and it doesn't make sense. And everybody will think, I like had all these things, like everybody's going to be like, what is she doing? Quitting her job, changing careers. How can you go to law school and then do something else? And but it was like all of that went out the window. And so then I decided, like, I need to figure out the quickest way to get this education and start doing this work, because I knew I wanted to work in trauma, and I knew I needed the license to do that, and the education to do that, and the understanding and the experience. Just like blessing of blessings, because like people don't tell you can have second careers in you, like what you did too. Like, people don't tell you that you can change and you can do what you want, and like do it.
Yeah. Shit, I can like feel that right here. That's so amazing. Also because similar thing happened to me. So you had been thinking about making a change, and you've been reading, and you've been interested in it, and you've been seeing the development in yourself. And then you went to this seminar, and that was a moment of like realization in retrospect.
Yeah, like I remember one of the social workers, and this was a national conference. So somebody stood up and was sharing about how she does this program at her agency where she will do this thing called a mindful minute in a staff meeting. And I was like, and she would, take a break and everyone would take a minute, stretch and move and have this time, right? And anyways, I just remember like listening to this person and I can still picture her talking and thinking like, okay, I can bring that to our staff meetings maybe and like see how I can infuse that in. But also, I really want to do this every day. I want to think about this every day. Um, and advocacy will always be an important part of my life. Like it's in my blood doing that work. That's not changing. But the coming from macro to micro just felt suddenly hugely significant to me. Like hugely significant and I have to do it. And I have to figure out how to do it, which also like that takes a village too.
Huh. I mean, you're like speaking my language here. It's amazing. Macro to micro. Yeah, the same sort of transition, the feeling like that you can make an impact in people's lives through, one individual at a time, and you feel the change happening in a very direct way. It's very gratifying and intellectually stimulating. For me,
Yeah.
I was missing the intellectual part. I mean, I felt like when I was studying people, it was vague and it wasn't scientific, so it was about gathering information and trying to understand as many, but there wasn't a really clear A to B benefit type of process. You put things out in the world, you inform people, and that's important, but how does that actually help an individual? How does it help society? It was unclear. It didn't feel like I was making a difference. It felt like I was contributing to this idea that is supposedly helpful on a societal level. But it didn't feel like that for me, and that doesn't take away from the importance of the thing. It was just like, it wasn't helping me personally. It was actually hurting me in a weird way.
Yeah, I get that. That's exactly, I mean, you could see how it was hurting me. I mean, I was in pain all the time, really. And I think that's amazing to like listen to yourself and be like, okay, something's going to change and I'm actually going to change it.
Yeah. Holy shit. So God, I have a million questions. Okay. So the Mind Body Connect, what was that book, by the way? Do you remember?
So it's called the Mindbody Prescription and it's by Dr. John Sarno, who passed away a couple years ago. But that book changed my life. Not the first time I read it, 5 years after the first time I read it. And I literally Googled Dr. Sarna, doctors, DC, and just tried to find anybody that had any kind of affiliation. And I found someone. And then she connected me to someone else.
I'm going to, in whatever caption thing goes under this video, I'll put in a link to that book. Both of us approach this kind of thing in a different way. I mean, for you, it's about healing and trauma, and the mind-body connection. And for me, I think, right? So correct me if I'm wrong, but and for me, it's more about the what happens after you're healed, sort of. It's like growth post healing, living your best life type of thing. In order to live your best life, if you have trauma, if you are having these things, it's kind of impossible. There's big roadblock. Once you've dealt with that, then you can evolve. But there's an overlap also, because like you've described, the change in career, the moving towards something that really fulfilled you, was also happening at the same time as the healing. So it's not a perfect continuum. So let's just talk a little bit about like the work that you do, and what you find so fascinating about it. What does it actually look like? What kind of people are you helping? What kind of journeys have you seen? I'll just leave it a little bit open.
Okay, so a couple of things. And I do not have the greatest memory, but I have a bunch of thoughts. So I'm going to try to go with them.
Okay.
Okay. So first of all, like what you were just saying about like the different paths of how the healing happens and the growth happens. This is why I believe deeply in integrative care. So it's integrative and collaborative, and you bring in different people. So when I was dealing with my own health issues, I had this group of people I called the dream team. I had the doctor, I had the trauma psychologist, I had physical therapist. I had all these different people that were playing a role in helping me to heal. A yoga teacher, mindfulness expert. Like I had like all these different peeps because I'm like, okay, I believe I'm strong and that I have a lot of stuff around me, but like to be strong, I need the people and like the humility to know that like it takes help, right? Like I'm a new mom. Like to me, that also takes like you need a village, and when you don't have it, you're fucked. Same for healing and growth. So like someone like you to have around with someone like me hopefully helps. And I don't see myself as like, hey, like I'm here to be I don't heal anyone, right? Like I'm here to just help you along with that and help support you in doing that work and hopefully help fill your unique toolbox with what you need to get to where you want to be.
That's the humanistic perspective, right? That's also
yeah. And it's a whole person and environment like view, right? Like it's not just what's going on in your head, in your heart, in your body physically. It's also, where are you living? How is the environment, the like actual climate impacting you? How is the economy impacting you? Culture, racism, justice issues. I mean, it's big. And I like that because that's also, I can see that in a really big way because of that macro cast. And I think it's totally. And I think that that's really important to acknowledge that there's like so many different moving pieces to somebody. You're not, I work with a lot of people that have cancer or caregivers of people with cancer. You're not coming in just to talk about cancer. No, like the job sucks, like you're fighting with your person, sex life, whatever it is, like it's all of it. And like, even just knowing that like that one thing like we're starting with, there's usually 100 other things, or maybe something else really important that you figure out later. I like to be really open to working with people. Everybody is different. And you mentioned before evidence-based work. Like I'm really an evidence-based junkie. And I think like part of why I work so many hours, even when I'm not seeing so many clients, is also about like really thinking through the evidence base for what you're dealing with and what might help, the science and the research and the empirical studies show what might help you. And I care about that. And I love like, when I work with the adolescent young adult population with cancer, and we're talking like mostly like 18 to 40s, that's a developing area in research. So the research of older adults with cancer or with babies or young children with cancer is very different than a teenager experience or college experience or being 26 years old. And so I just really like to dig into that and try to really think about like, how can I help you get to where you want to be? And that always starts with like, what are your goals? And like, how do we map that? And I know you think a lot about that too, like short-term goals, long-term goals. And then like, what does that mean? What is the goal to have less anxiety? What does that look like? If you woke up tomorrow and it was all gone, how would you feel? And then like, we try to figure out how to find solutions to get there together.
So this conversation, I feel like could last for 7 days, based on everything you're saying. And I'm like, okay, what do I ask about next? Because it's all fascinating. So a big part of that resonates with me is the humanistic perspective. Okay, what does that mean? To me, it's that people are capable and entirely resourceful on their own. And it's this weird thing where like you do need other people and you do need resources and you do need help with guiding your journey, but you're also capable of doing it. You don't need to use other people as a crutch. It's a very different perspective on getting help. And it sort of takes the weight off of, or the kind of victim mentality away from wanting help or going out and getting help. And then as a practitioner, you also don't have to feel like, I'm the expert and you're this like helpless creature and I'm going to save you from your problems. It's so much more like a partnership, and in the end, that's ultimately so much more rewarding too. The sort of, and it sounds like, and that's kind of where the idea of the word coach comes from. It's like coach versus savior kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's that perspective, and it sounds like that is also the perspective you have in the work you do, and how things have changed so dramatically in terms of mental health in the last several decades, where I think it used to be much more like doctor patient, expert subject type of thing, which understandably created so much stigma around it. That's where like the head shrinker and like the you're going to go and they're going to manipulate you into being somebody you don't want to be. And now it's such about the self-directed journey that a person takes. And what I love about that also is that there's all kinds of science now to back up the how effective that is.
Totally. And you're so right. Like, I think if you look back to the beginnings of doing counseling work and everything, like, yes, the doctor is the expert or the therapist is the expert. For us, and I think for your work too, like the client is the expert of their lives. We all have been through a lot, but we're not damaged. We've just been through shit and like can work on it, But like, I think, it's not giving it over to somebody else to fix. It's right. It's like you're coming in like I want to work on this. And like, then my response is like, great. Like, I'm here to help you however I can. And I think like, that's really exciting. It's also humbling and like scary. Like, I didn't know at the beginning, like, how do I get to be the one to do that? Like, how can I sit with somebody who's dying and help them? Or grieving the loss of somebody, or going through terrible postpartum. But I think it's day by day, right? Like, it's just like sitting with the person, and sometimes it's just like compassionate listening. Like, I'm here. I don't have anything else to say, like, other than just like, I'm here, and then we can like take steps. But yeah, I mean, always client's driving. Client is the expert they are the expert. And, and that's why, like, also like you and I bring in that evidence-based piece. Cause it's like, oh, hey, like, maybe you didn't know about this. And a lot of that, I think like, I think I've talked to you a bit about this before, like, about storytelling and like why I believe really deeply in like narrative approaches to therapy, because there's just like so much power in looking at like the stories that we've been told our whole lives, the stories we have told our whole lives, and then waking up one day and being like, hey, like, I'm done with that story, so I'm going to have another one, and like, this is what my story is going to be. And I like how much power is in there to be like, I'm not going to be the anxious, like, type A perfectionist person, workaholic that makes herself sick. Like, no, I'm going to like actually sit in this sunroom and have the air come in and write and talk to Danny this morning. And that's really nice. Like, new story. It's good.
Yeah. I'm not going to be the person who can't separate himself from his work identity. you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's so interesting how the story feels external sometimes. It feels like this thing outside of yourself, this unchangeable, immutable, like law of gravity type of thing. That this is just the way things are, and that you take them for granted.
Right.
But um, just by speaking it out loud a lot, it's because so much of that is unconscious. All these stories that are governing our life. So just the idea of being able to sit with somebody who is actually listening, who's like intently, very actively listening to what you're saying, all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's the story that I just said out loud, and I never heard myself say that before. That's like 90% of the work. It's amazing.
It is amazing.
You hear the story and then you're like, oh, yeah, duh. Of course I feel like shit about my relationship with whoever. This is how I'm thinking about it. And
Yeah.
just the knowledge of seeing yourself think about something is incredibly powerful. And that's also where the ability to change comes in. And maybe slightly different approaches, depending on the baseline, where the person is starting, and how entrenched, how much damage with the lowercase d has that story caused.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's like even challenging yourself to like look at, I guess I imagine you see this a lot, is like what does success mean to you? And you've been told one thing your whole life. I mean, success means something to me today that is a completely different definition from 10 years ago. Completely. And like, thank God, like I found the space and the like permission to myself to like remake that. And I think, yeah, the piece of storytelling and questioning is so powerful. And that's another reason why like I love doing expressive writing workshops, because I just like, I think we often don't pause enough to like just see what's coming out, like what lands on the page for you. And like, yeah, sometimes like you're saying, like you surprise yourself, I think, with what's going on or how you think about something. And then when you read it out loud to a group of people in a very, very safe space, it's that can be very healing too. Um, Anyways, I digress.
Oh my God, I want to take one of your workshops. I also want to work with you on those workshops because that sounds incredible. The idea of, something I loved about photography was that I was always reflecting through the process of expressing. I learned about myself the whole time, and I think that was, one of the main reasons I got into photography, and why becoming a coach for me was some kind of a seamless transition in some ways, because it's that, what do I think about this? And just asking yourself, oh, this thing is happening, from what do I think about it? Rather than just taking it for granted, or making assumptions based on your whole life, and not questioning them. And so most recently, my business, my focus has been on helping creative leaders communicate more effectively, both internally and externally. So it's revisiting those narratives and going, all right, well, why am I afraid to speak up at the meeting? Why am I afraid to set a boundary with my client and say, this is how much I charge, this is how much I'm willing to work, this is how much I'm not willing to work? And it's because you have all these like should ideas in your head. Well, a professional does this. They're going to think I'm this. They're not going to like me. They're going to fire me. They're, all kinds of these like stories that happen. And the second you go, oh, this is the story, especially for somebody who is creative, and you go, oh wow, I just imagined that into reality. It's not real. It's a creation.
Yes. Yes. We should do, I would love to do like a whole other talk about that, because I think like that's the more you open yourself up to allowing yourself to be as creative as you want to be, and try to like, and then turn it into reality. Then you start, it's such a new concept that I definitely question sometimes, like, can I charge for that? Can I charge for that? Like, so it took me 6 months to create my ethical will workshop writing program, doing legacy letters, 6 months. And I was still like, I don't know, like, is it okay? Like, I just want to help people. And I think like having good people around you to help you think that through and remind you that like just because you're having fun at what you're doing doesn't mean that it's also not like financially worth something too. Like, and I'm learning that every day because I'm in a space now where I love what I'm doing. And that's so, and also like I can be as creative as I want to be because I'm in control of my job now, right? Like there's not somebody being like, you have to do this by this time and this deadline and this press release and whatever. It's really empowering, and it's also intimidating. And like your clients are very lucky to have your help in navigating that piece too.
Yeah, and then like by charging for something that you love and putting some sort of container around it, you don't spin out of control into the, which I did like constantly, which was the line disappears between your job and you as a person, or your job and your value as a person and self-worth, because should I charge for this? Is it valuable? But I love it. So does that mean I'm not supposed to charge for it? And that can get really messy. It happens all the time with people who are doing things that are incredibly valuable, but for some reason they don't believe it, and so that goes into years of it could turn into trauma eventually.
Sure. And yeah, now I'm thinking about like two things. One is like looking back at like the core beliefs that got you to where you are, to like question whether or not that means you're worth something, or if your work product is worth something, because maybe you've been taught that that's not, that rainbow stuff you're doing is not whatever. Yeah. Like, I mean, I once had somebody, potentially a parent, tell me that like it seemed like I was being like a camp counselor, and I was but I was working so hard and doing all this stuff, which by the way, I was a camp counselor, but we're talking about when I was a lawyer. And I think like that really like, oh my gosh, that feels shitty. And now I don't feel shitty because I'm in control of that, and also like giving myself permission to like see where I can go with this stuff. And it's just fantastic. And the other piece is like, you need good people around you to like also tell you, this one of my mentors, teachers, friends, and now we're doing some work together, and she asked me if my rates went up. And I said, what do you mean? Because it was only going to be my second time doing a program with her. And she's like, you're supposed to, now's the time you tell me your rates are higher now. And I was like, what? Like, still like, huh? And she's like, okay. She's like, we're going to do this conversation again, and you're going to tell me that your rates have increased.
Right.
And he was like, oh, thank you. Okay, cool. Thanks. You don't always get those do-overs, and I really appreciated it.
Wow, what an amazing person to have around.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have to go in a little bit. So I'm, unfortunately, I would love to keep talking about this forever because, A, it's Mindy and I love to talk to you, and B, the subject matter is I can't talk about it enough. I can't think about it enough. It's always so fascinating, especially because now I feel like I have permission to do it, and a lot of the shame has been detached from it. Like I'm allowed to do it, and it's like professionally viable. Like you were saying, that you understand the value of it, and it is valuable. It's not like a self-indulgent, camp counselor type of thing. By the way, I was a camp counselor too. Camp counselors are awesome, and they should
be best.
And it's a very important person in your life. So, but that side, the work has value, and I feel like I believe in it instead of having this voice of the person who's like, yeah, it's not valuable, the it doesn't align with what a real professional is, something like that.
Yeah.
And when I came to that conclusion, when clients come to that conclusion, it's like so liberating. It's like, all right, I can talk to Mindy about this and feel just only positive about it. So thank you.
Thank you. This was fun.
Let's do it again. And let's talk about writing workshops and how to help people
Anytime.
retell their stories.
Cool.
Thanks so much, Mindy.
You're so welcome, Danny.
Talk to you soon.